My name is Jester Jersey, and today's Awareness Day event was to give more youth of a voice in the government. And so I think it's really important that young people be able to have a say in their government because a lot of issues affect young people today. And by being able to voice their opinions and their thoughts, they may be able to change the democracy and make things better in the local community and their lives and for their families. And so giving the vote to young people age 16 and older is definitely the best way to go for democracy and to be able to help communities across the country.
That was not fun.
How
That was
bad
not
did this building happen to be like this tall?
I'm Declan Sullivan. I feel like it is a huge issue that our youth don't have enough say in their future and the current situation in our society. I feel, even though I am too young to vote, and even if the voting age was lowered, it would still not allow me to vote. I feel that it would help me, as a youth, gain more of the ability to have a say by giving other youth more of a direct say in the government. I feel like we are very overlooked, and I feel like lowering the voting age to 16 would have us be much less neglected.
Jersey, thanks for coming out today for the Youth Vote Awareness Day here in Brattleboro, Vermont. And so I'm going to be talking about some of the work that I've been doing to empower youth across the country. And so, fortunately, we don't have a projector, so we're just going to have to look at the pictures, and I'll have to share it with some of you guys afterwards. But I'm going to go ahead and start. And so today I want to talk about empowering young people across the country. And so what is the youth vote? It's the idea that youth are capable of participation in the democratic process, with the main goal of being able to affect change in the world around them, both in the immediate local community, but as well as the world around them in the national scene. So in this graph, which you can't see, but I mean, there's a timeline of all like the different times when different groups have tried to talk about the issue of lowering the voting age to 16, whether that be locally or on a national level. So one of the groups that began to do the work to lower the voting age to 16 actually came way back in 1998 from a group called the National Youth Rights Association, or as they like to be known as NYRA for short. And so prior to that, there had been really no movements to talk about lowering the voting age. And then for some time, there was no discussion about what they should do about, like, do we have a movement or who was interested in it. So then a couple of years later, in 2003, California had a senator who talked about the idea of partial voting for youth who didn't have a full vote. And so the idea was to give people a partial vote to train them to get a full vote in a few years. But nothing really came of it. There was no legislation made, and then people kind of forgot about it. Then came the early 2010s, and so there were more local efforts from communities across the country to try to lower the voting age, and many of these movements came from the state of Maryland. And so one of those is the city of Tacoma Park. Now, Tacoma Park had a really active youth group that really wanted to lower the voting age because they felt that it was just the right thing to do. And so for several years, up till 2012, they communicated with their local leaders, the local council, the legislatures. And finally, by the end of 2012, they were able to lower the voting age to 16, becoming the first city in the United States. And the first ballot from a 16-year-old came in the year 2013, which was the year right after. So when other cities across Maryland had seen this, they were kind of encouraged and like, oh, hey, let's kind of do what Tacoma Park did and see if we can replicate that in our cities. So some of these local cities nearby, especially one town called Hyattsville, which is near Tacoma Park, was really particularly interested. And so they were one of the groups that were really encouraged from Tacoma Park's work to try to do the same thing. And so for a couple of years, 2013, 2014, they tried to do the same thing. They had gone through the process of contacting their lawmakers, their legislatures, and finally by 2015, the first ballot from a 16-year-old was cast in that city. So Hyattsville, Maryland became the second city in the United States to lower the voting age to 16. So after these two large victories in the United States, there have been more efforts by national groups to try to lower the voting age to 16, and this was in the mid-2010s, so about 2015. So there have been several groups, mostly in the state of Maryland, but also in some places across the country in different states that want to try to lower the municipal voting age to 16. And so not really much came between 2015 and 2020. But in 2020, the idea became more mainstream because some people were trying to discuss it on national news. And many of these folks come from the same group that initially called for the lower of the voting age back in 1998 from NIRA. And so in 2021, the following year, the first iteration of a national bill to support lowering the federal voting age to 16 came in the form of House Joint Resolution 23, which came from Representative Grace Meng of New York City. And so that was published in January of 2021. And so, emboldened by this new piece of legislation, some groups wanted to form a coast-to-coast dialogue, meaning they wanted to include different groups from states from the coastal cities of New York City, but also in Oregon, which had a sizable number of people who were interested in lowering the voting age to 16. And so that began the coast-to-coast talks online. And so until there was finally a group that decided, hey, let's have a Zoom meeting, because this was ongoing during the time of the pandemic. And then they decided to have a meeting on April 15th, which happens to be tax day of April 2021. And so the idea was that youth are paying taxes and they contribute to their societies, but they didn't have a vote. And so by having it on tax day in 2021, the idea of like being taxed without getting the proper representation was something that stood out to people who may have supported their particular movement. So after the Coast to Coast virtual meeting, more groups started to form both online and off in supporting of the lowering of the voting age to 16. But unfortunately, House Joint Resolution 23 never got a vote in Congress, so nothing ever really came of it. And so groups kind of reconvened and decided, what should we do next? Should we continue promoting the idea of lowering the voting age? And so that's what they did. And unfortunately, it was still during the time of the pandemic, so it made in-person collaboration really difficult. And so we kind of just waited around. Finally, in 2013, just last year, when the new Congress came in, they reintroduced the bill, but now it was called House Joint Resolution 16, and this was published in January of last year. And so the idea is to encourage folks to lower the voting age to 16, because a lot of people believe that 16-year-olds do have a right and a say and are affected by the ongoing issues in our country. And so this is where I kind of come in. So I've been doing a lot of advocacy on the idea of lowering the voting age for more than a decade. And so one of my colleagues came up with the idea of, why don't you do a panel in Boston? And I'm like, okay, what's the panel called? And they said it's at a conference called the Frontiers of Democracy, located at Tufts University in Boston. So I decided to hold a panel there with the coordination of several groups that support lowering the voting age to 16. And so that's what we did over the summer. And so this is just me going back and so mentioning NIRA. And so they were one of the first groups that initially called out for the idea of lowering the voting age. But these are some like the older logos that they had. And one of their more active areas was Southeast Florida. And it came from an individual called Elijah Manley. So he actually tried to run for Congress at the time. This was in 2012. So he was really instrumental in getting people to talk about the idea and discussing lowering the voting age even further and become part of like a national dialogue. So he's what people accredit him to being one of those folks to foment that conversation around lowering the voting age. Then in mid-2010s, another group emerged that was focused solely on the idea of lowering the voting age, which is actually a part of another group that is focused on general participation in politics. But this particular advocacy campaign was focused solely on lowering the voting age to 16, and it was called Vote 16 USA. And so since then, they've been almost around for a decade now. They've been continuing to prepare people and encourage people to talk more about lowering the idea of lowering the voting age. And so they were really encouraged by what had happened in Tacoma Park in Hyattsville, Maryland, and they even took a quote from one of the first 16-year-olds who was able to vote in the United States, and this is coming from Ben Miller. So he said, I was one of the first 16-year-olds to register to vote in Tacoma Park under the May 2013 amendment to lower the voting age in municipal elections. And so he was just really glad for that. And I think a lot of young people who don't have a vote today should be able to get a vote, and would agree with Ben Miller's assertion that he was really happy to vote at 16 because he was able to feel like he was being heard and he was able to make change. And so with all of the victories coming from Tacoma Park and Maryland and people opening up discussion to lowering the voting age, there's ideas of new people who want to contribute to this efforts who are not necessarily located in locations where they already talk about lowering the voting age. So from this, there's the idea of my particular work. And so, like I mentioned, I've been an ardent supporter of lowering the voting age to 16, and I've continued to talk about it in conferences and panels and with other individuals who are also like-minded and also interested in talking about lowering the voting age. One of the things that got a really big key endorsement to the voting age movement came in 2015 and also 2019 by the same individual who used to be our former Speaker of the House, Congress, Nancy Pelosi. So in 2015, she told the New York Times that I've always been for lowering the voting age to 16. And then after that, 4 years later, she came up again and said that she reiterated that she still had support for lowering the voting age. So that gave us a really big boost for those in the supporting the lowering the voting age movement. And so, unfortunately, when we're trying to pick up momentum and steam to talk more about this discussion, that's when, unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic happened, which made it really difficult for us to gather and do in-person collaboration. So we were kind of in lockdown and dormancy during that period of time. But then with the COVID pandemic being declared over last year, we've been able to kind of, work together and reconnoiter and reconvene and decide, hey, we have to continue pushing for this movement. And so that was the idea that, hey, let's have this awareness day idea. And so lately I've been in touch with Brattleboro Common Sense. And so they're really prevalent in Brattleboro. And so they were really instrumental in lowering the voting age to 16 here. And on top of that, not just lowering the voting age to 16, but also considering the idea of getting kids to be on the school board. And so they've been really unique in that aspect of not just empowering children or young people in the ballot box, but also getting them to be part of their local governance on the school board. And so they've been working on their efforts since 2013, and they did pass the Youth Vote Amendment in late 2019. Unfortunately, it did not come into actual practice until last year when Brattleboro officially lowered its local voting age to 16 after a legislative veto override, thanks to the governor that tried to veto the legislation. First, he had said that he was supportive of it, but then when people found out that he wasn't, the local legislator who were supportive of the amendment to lower the voting age to 16 in Brattleboro said, okay, we're going to override that. And so that's why 16-year-olds in Brattleboro today have a voting age of 16. And so today, we now have the House Joint Resolution 16 in Congress, so that's the national bill. And so supporters across the country, whether they're in California, New York, or even in Brattleboro, Vermont, are really interested in this particular bill just because it gives more power and voice to the people who are already enfranchised. And so our Congress currently has a bill called House Joint Resolution 16. As mentioned in the news, one of the goals of today's Awareness Day event is to bring more awareness of the particular effort behind this particular bill, both locally and in a national sense. Because our main goal is to empower more youth and to give them more say in their particular future and in their government. So I think both types of efforts, both local and national, are important to help empower young people, whether that's participating to vote for the first time, electing someone onto a school board, or actually joining a school board themselves. And so, in closing, I just want to say that definitely today's next steps would be democracy is not an overnight process. It requires some work, but it is good work. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you need to work harder, but you will always help empower someone who doesn't have their own political voice to make changes for the better. We just need to work better together if we want to empower more younger people. And so what I say to you today is the future is yours. And so depending on what you want to do with that future, it's up to you. But the more people you empower, I think the more positive and better their future will look. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody have any questions?
No, I thought that final statement was really good though.
Yeah.
I think it really sends a strong message.
Mm-hmm. I think about Brett, I think that we were talking to you about that, like, it does kind of seem weird that 16 and 17-year-olds have to pay taxes, but then you don't get any say on where your taxes go. I mean, I don't think any of us really do, but like, I think especially young people not feeling like you're asking us to give us your money, but you're not actually letting us have any say in that. I think it's pretty strong. And that was kind of what inspired you
Yeah, because when I was 16, I couldn't vote, and I just thought that was pretty unfair because I had plans to go to college, and I was like, oh, I gotta help my parents save money because I know college is really expensive. And then so I said, I gotta get a job, and then I was driving, I was paying taxes on my income from work. I had to put gas in my vehicle. I was helping my parents pay insurance because I was under their insurance. And I was doing all this and having a lot of adult responsibilities, and I just couldn't vote. And I just thought that wasn't really fair. And I said, I can't be the only person thinking about this. And then I looked up online, and there were so many different groups that were working on lowering the voting age. And I was like, I got to work with these guys and connect with them. And so that's the idea of how we came up with that coast-to-coast virtual meeting online during the pandemic. And so we were talking about what are ways that we can get this discussion going across the country. And so the idea was to have mini talks such as we're having right now for awareness days, or participating in panels at conferences and writing op-eds. And so we're getting the word out there, and more people are getting interested. And so that's why lately we've seen not just local movements where we've seen in Brattleboro and other towns, especially in Maryland, but we are seeing national bills coming out as well, where it's there's this national consciousness that more and more people are interested in lowering the voting age. And one of the things I didn't mention in my presentation is that there are actually a lot of countries around the world that have actually lowered the voting age just within the last 10 years. And so when Tacoma Park, Maryland had lowered their voting age to 16 in 2013, the year after, Scotland, through a referendum, actually lowered their voting age to 16 in the year 2014, which is just a year after Tacoma Park. And so just recently in 2022, Germany had lowered their voting age to 16 as well, their national voting age. So you can vote at 16 in Germany in federal elections, in their national government elections. So there's a lot of momentum around lowering the voting age to 16.
Was there a point, I'm just thinking now about when did it even become voting, was it always 18? Cause I know your history, so when people just originally started voting in our country, was there an age? I know it was gender for sure, only males could do it, but is there was there a time, do you know, wherein all of a sudden it became a certain age demographic, or was it always you had to be?
Yeah, there was, for a time, there wasn't really any particular focus on an age. It's just because when people had come to the United States and we had just won our freedom from the British Army through the American Revolution, many people just assumed that the people who were involved in their local government, which tended to be older white male individuals, were landowning and unfortunately slave owning at the time. And they were just given the vote automatically. There was no particular age requirement. You didn't have to be married or anything. And obviously, wives, if they were married to their husbands, depended on their husbands to convey their particular thoughts about the state of things. In other words, they didn't have the vote, but they had to cede that to their husband. And so the husband would vote for the entire estate. And so there was no particular age requirement. I think when the first census was enacted in 1790 to kind of count the population across the different colonies that were comprised of the United States, then the idea of okay, let's have some requirements, you be landowning, you be 21 years or older at that particular time. And then obviously through the course of history, there have been arguments to lower for it, and that's what we have right now. And so now we're thinking, okay, but it doesn't go far enough because it's not answering the questions or replying or addressing the issues that younger people do have in terms of income issues, economy issues, taxation issues. And we believe that at 16, you're ready to vote just because you're having a lot of adult responsibilities. And it's just rationally supportable based on the evidence we have right now. And because a lot of other nations also find it rational to lower the voting age to 16. And we have a lot of cities within the United States who are, if not having lowered their voting age to 16, are at least considering it.
Thanks.
Thoughts, comments?
Is there anything major that you think could help the cause? If there's one specific thing or a few specific things that you think would really boost the activity of making it happen?
Yeah, I think definitely getting more younger people to know about their particular rights, because I guess the idea of going to the ballot box, people have to be not only civically minded, but civically educated. And so a lot of students who are in high school are taking civics courses. And so sometimes they take the class and they just think about, oh, I want to get an A at the end of the semester, but they don't always think about the ramifications of the things they've learned. Like, for example, how do I put this into practice? Because a lot of times people go into school in a school environment or school setting and think, oh, we're going to have physical education classes. No one tells you to open a book and look at people throwing a ball or something like that. Like, for example, if you're doing basketball in PE, no one shows you a picture of a guy throwing a ball and the ball enters the hoop. You actually change into physical equipment attire and then go play the sport. Whereas in civics, they tell you, okay, this is how you fill up a ballot, and then this is where you put it, and then hopefully your vote is counted, but you never really are able to put it in practice until maybe a few years later, if you're not transitioning from, say, high school to college. And so one way that could really help the movement is if actually people who are teaching civics courses called for like lowering the voting age, because they can say, hey, we're teaching a course, we want to be able to put the lessons that I've been teaching my students into practice. So that would really help. And also getting the feedback from the younger people themselves who are in these courses, who could learn about this particular thing and wanting to know, hey, we want to have a voting age at 16 because we're learning about this in our course. We want to put it into practice, and we also believe we can make change in our local government or even our national government. So that's a way to drive change.
Seems to be somebody.
I just think, well, this is not really on the script, but like the idea with the awareness day is like we're having an event now, and then there are a lot of events across the country as well from like the different groups that I work with. And so fortunately they couldn't make it to Brattleboro, but unfortunately I couldn't make it to their events. But if we all spread out, we can cover more ground that way, and we can kind of discuss it more and bring it to mind to like local news outlets and hopefully talk to them and say, hey, we have all these different groups on the ground working across the country in different areas, and we're trying to go to places that have already lowered the voting age to 16, not because we want to lower the voting age there, but because we can already see the results from maybe past elections where people have voted at 16 and say, hey, there's a large turnout for people who were enfranchised. And so that's another way to drive up participation and help the national cause, because the idea is you want to do something and people would be interested in doing it. So if it's something that people talk about and say, hey, this is something that's been come for discussion about the idea of lowering the voting age, maybe we can talk about this, and if our city doesn't already have it, maybe younger people who live in that city would be interested in trying to lower the local voting age at least, or maybe if they're really interested, they could do statewide, because there have been movements across the board. So it's not just like the work that had been done in Brattleboro that was only going to affect the city of Brattleboro, and also what I mentioned, the House Joint Resolution 16, which is the national bill. But there have been movements to try to do stuff either on countywide or statewide across various states across the country. And so sometimes those are really difficult, because like local stuff may be easy because some people just get to know their leaders, like the mayor, or if their city's run by like a council or something, it may be easier. And then sometimes you have someone in like the national level, like Representative Grace Meng, who's the author of House Joint Resolution 16, who's really supportive of lowering the voting age across the country, because I guess the rationale is like if cities like Brattleboro and other cities in Maryland, for example, are thinking about it, there are probably other cities out there where they don't really necessarily have the people like myself who are very supportive of it, who are advocating for it, or who are willing to just go up to the media, because not everyone can speak well, or maybe some people can speak really well, they're just really shy, or they just don't have a large organization behind them, and so they feel intimidated, like, oh, if I come up with this idea, people will think I'm dumb or crazy or something like that. But there are quite a few folks who actually support lowering the voting age. They're just spread far in between. And so by us being able to talk more about it and having an awareness day and learning more about this particular issue, I think it brings it more to mind for people, and it becomes more of a talking point, and people want to discuss it more and say, hey, what's the worst that can happen when you enfranchise 16-year-olds? I mean, you make democracy a lot better. And so the idea is if we can enfranchise more younger people and let more younger people vote, I think by and large we would make democracy a whole lot better.